Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar, which today will be on the hot topic of data analytics in NetSuite. So for the session today, we're going to be covering an overview of the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks feature, which is a reporting and analytics module, which is now available to all NetSuite customers for no extra cost on your subscription. So this is a feature that allows you to create reporting workbooks, which will contain tables, pivot tables and charts, which come from multiple data sets. And today we're just going to give you a short overview of the capabilities of the module. So it won't be a full training session, but we'll go into quite a bit of detail of what's possible with the functionality. If you've got any questions during the webinar, there's a Q&A option, which you can use down which is at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom menu. And we can do some hopefully we'll answer them as we go, but we'll do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar as well. So I'm going to hand over to our NetSuite Technical Lead now, Kenneth, who will take you through the capabilities of the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks feature.
Hi, good morning or afternoon, everyone. Good to see a lot of familiar names on the participants list. So I'm just going to take you through the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks today. I've got a short slides at the start, and then we'll go into kind of a full demo. Just thought I'd put my camera on for a second, just to sort of prove I'm real, but I'll turn it off for the remainder. Okay. Okay, so SuiteAnalytics Workbooks. Okay, so the agenda we're going to cover here is just an overview of what is SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, some of the key features, how you can enable it, and then a demo. Okay. So the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks is a new analytical tool available to NetSuite. When we say new, it's been around for probably a couple of years now, but in each release that NetSuite has happened in the last few years, the functionality around the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks has been improving substantially with each release. So the NetSuite say that SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, you can create highly customizable workbooks that combine data sets, tables, pivot tables, and charts using a single tool that leverages the new analytics data source. So what does that mean? So at the moment in NetSuite, you've got various reporting tools. You've got your standard reports, your saved searches, and then you've got this new tool, the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, which aims to overcome some of the restrictions that the other reporting tools have. So some of the key features of SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, it's got drag and drop report creation, which we'll see in the demo. You can do multi-level table joins. So some of the restrictions with your current reporting, like the saved searches and the reports, is that you're only able to maybe join between tables one level up and one level down from the record that you're trying to report on. Whereas in SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, you can do multi-level table joins. So you could start from a transaction, go to the item, and then go to records linked to the item, all from the SuiteAnalytics Workbook. You can also use custom records. So if you've got any bespoke development that uses custom records, or any custom records that you've created yourself, then they can be reported on using SuiteAnalytics Workbooks. You can use formula fields. I've got a couple of examples of different types of formula fields during the demo. And similar to saved searches, those formula fields can be very complex. You can do pivot table reports. So a while ago, NetSuite did have the ability to do pivot tables from a saved search. It was a beta feature that never got fully released, because this functionality, the workbooks, now enables you to do that. So with saved searches, sometimes trying to get reports to display the way you want them can be very difficult and require lots of complex formulas. With the SuiteAnalytics Workbooks, that complication is taken away by having this pivot table functionality. You can also have multiple data sets in a single workbook. So one workbook can have multiple reports in it, and those different reports or tabs in the workbook can come from different data sets. So in the one workbook, you might have tabs that contain transaction information, tabs that contain support case information, and other tabs that contain employee information all in a single workbook. Now you've also got multiple graph options within here as well. So again, some of the restrictions with the other reporting tools such as Save Searches is it's got a very limited amount of graphing options that you can do from a Save Search. So to enable the feature, you could be able to tell if it's enabled because up the top in your menu structure there will be a tab called Analytics. So if it is enabled, then that Analytics tab will be showing. If it's not enabled, then you would need to go in as an administrator to your system and go to Setup, Company, and Enable Features. And within those features, under the Analytics tab, there is a feature called SuiteAnalytics Workbook, which you can then enable to turn on the feature. In addition to this, there's a couple of role permissions. So users will require the SuiteAnalytics Workbook permission against a role in order to create and run workbook reports. And there's also a permission called Analytics Administrator, which gives people with that permission the ability to edit and monitor other people's workbooks as well. Okay, so stop the slideshow now and go on with the demo. Okay, so I've now got NetSuite open on my system. Alan, if you can't see it, just give me a shout, but I'm assuming if I don't hear anything, then it's all showing okay. So up the top, we have this Analytics tab within the menu structure. So if I select the Analytics tab, that then takes me into the area where all the analytics reports or workbooks are stored. This is broken down into two tabs. You've got data sets and you've got the workbooks themselves. There is a lot of templates. You see the ones that say template against them that come out of the box now. So you've got ones for sales, for purchases, and for warehouse. And depending on what features you've got enabled in your account, there may be other ones available there too. Within this section, you also have at the top right a Learn About Analytics button, where you can get more information about different features of the SuiteAnalytics workbooks, such as conditional formatting, how data sets work, data model basics, etc. So a lot of useful videos in there. In addition, simply by pressing the Help button at the top, will take you into the NetSuite Help Center, and there's a lot of content in there as well, with an overview about how the SuiteAnalytics Workbook also works. Okay, so I'm going to start with the data set. So the data set is what you're going to use to define the fields and records that you're going to be able to report on in your workbooks. I'm going to create one from scratch, but you can see there is some predefined ones in there, such as sales and purchases and transaction ones in there. But you can create new data sets from scratch if, again, you're reporting on custom records or anything like that. So here we've got a lot of the records in the system. There's a search option up the top for searching for particular transaction types. There's a few different category types. So here we've got these are custom records. If I go to sales, so you've got sales invoiced and sales ordered are particular record types. These aren't normal records. So you can see here, they're not standard, they're analytical. So these are records that NetSuite have put together to try and take some of the work away from you guys and having to work out the different fields and things that you need. So if you're looking for sales invoiced or ordered, there's a wee shortcut there for them. The main one with a lot of reports though is your transaction record, especially if you're looking at sales or purchase transactions or journals, etc. So it's a standard record, and that's the one I'm going to use today for the demo. So when you select your transaction, it then says you're going to create a transaction data set, and it automatically comes up with some fields automatically in there that it assumes you might want. So it's got date, memo, entity document number in there. And you can see here I've got 685 rows in total. So at this point, what you're really trying to do is add in all the fields that you're potentially going to be able to want to report on using this data set. And I'm going to add a few more in here. So these are all from the transaction record. I'm going to add some from the transaction line. So each transaction is made up of transaction lines. So if I click on transaction line, then I can see the fields available in here. So I'm going to add in class. So I can either double click on it and that'll add it to the right, or I can drag. So if I then go to department, I can then drag that in, and then that adds it on. So that's the kind of drag and drop functionality there. And as I add them, it's updating the data there. And now my number of rows now has increased quite a lot. It's gone up to 6,500 rows because I've now added line detail in to that particular data set. I'm going to add a few more. I'm going to add in item. I'm going to add in quantity. And I'm going to add in subsidiary. Okay. So I've added those ones in. I do have some amount fields here, but these amount fields are done in the currency of the transaction rather than my base currency. And if I'm doing reporting, I'm going to want to do it in base currency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand transaction line, and then I get next one down is transaction accounting line. So you can see there, that's a record within a record. And this is our multi-level joins coming into play here. So within my transaction accounting line, I'm now going to pick the net amount. So that's going to be then in base currency, which for this particular report just now, you can see it's UK subsidiaries, so it's pounds. I'm also going to add in go back to my billing address, and I'm going to add in, if I click on billing address itself, get the fields for billing address, I'm going to add in the country as well, because I might want to do reports based on the country that my customers are in. So that's me building up my data that I want to report on. One thing I'm noticing at this point though is if I scroll across to the left here, these are all bills, which is on the purchasing side, whereas I'm wanting to create a report just now to do with sales. So I'm going to add in some criteria into this. So again, using my fields on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to my transaction. And this is where the criteria can vary depending on what you're trying to achieve. In this case, I'm going to use criteria of posting because I want it to be based on actual invoice values. I'm going to say yes to that. So again, if I put posting no to that, then that's going to maybe include sales orders in there rather than invoices. And then I want to do this based on sales. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my transaction line, and I'm going to go to my transaction accounting line, and then I'm going to click on my account. So that's my nominal account that it's then posted to. And I'm only going to want ones that have a particular type. So I'm going to add that to my criteria and say I'm only interested in lines that have an income account type. So again, I can click on it and press the arrow, or I can double click on it. So now I've got this report, and you can see it's updating. The number of rows is now going down to 715. And I've got credit memos and invoices in there. So the first 6 or so is credit memos, and then I'm down to invoices. But if I go along to my right-hand side here, I've got an issue now that my credit memos are showing positive values and my invoices are showing negative values. And likewise, my amount net, positive values for credit notes and negative values for invoices. And that's simply because from an accounting perspective, income is treated as a credit, so it's a negative value. But for my reports, that's not going to look very good. So I'm now going to use this to create a formula field to rectify that. Now, if you'd used one of the other data sets, such as the sales invoice data sets, then that kind of automatically has things to resolve that issue. So what I can do now is I can hit in formulas, and I can create a new formula. And then here, I'm going to put in net amount. I'm just going to put formula as the name, just so that I can know that that's the field I'm looking for. And then you can search for your different fields. So in this case, I want a transaction accounting line field, and it was the amount net. Top. So by double clicking that, it puts it up the top. Now I'm simply going to do times -1. And with my output type, if I press validate to that just now, it's giving me a warning saying the output type is set to integer, but the actual return type is float. Please change either the formula or the output type. So I'll change that to float, so it's the right type. Validate it again. Now got a big green tick and it's happy with that. But see, that's a very basic formula. You can get very complex with the formulas you can put in here. I'm going to do the same with my quantity. So that was on my transaction line, and I've got my quantity. And just multiply that by -1. Again, I'll have the same issue with that, so I'll make it a float, validate that, and it's happy. And then like the other fields, I can then drag and drop them onto my data set. At this point, I'm not too worried about the way that it looks, because the data set is then just going to get used in the workbooks. Okay. But as you can see, it's building up as I go along. My monitor is not the biggest, so if you've got kind of separate monitors, you'll see a lot more information without having to scroll across too much. Okay. So now I can see there, I've got my net amount formula field, and it's taking the value and multiplying it by -1. You can also export. So you can export data to CSV file. If you, from this data, you want to export that to CSV to take that further. So I'm now going to save this data set. Okay. And I'm just going to call this and you can put in a description for your data set as well. So if you're referring back to it, you can understand what it's trying to achieve. And then I can save that data set. And that data set then will be available to me or to anyone that's got the analytics administrator permission against their role. You can then share this data set. So if you do want to share it with other people for them to use in their reports and they don't have the administrator role, you can either do this by role, by selecting different roles that can have access to it, or you can do it with particular employees and give them access to it. So you just select them, move them over to the right-hand side, and then select share, and they would then also have access to this data set. So now that we've created that data set, I'm now going to create a workbook. So I can do create new workbook from here. And this is where it starts to get a bit more exciting. So we've got the data set on the left-hand side that we're creating this from. And I can then have various tabs. So this is tab 1. I need to then choose what I want in this tab. So for the first tab, I'll create a table. And then it's simply a case then of either double-clicking or dragging into the table to start creating it. So again, I can put in date. When I put in entity there, it's asking me whether I want to show the hierarchy or whether it's just child level only. So this is useful for customers where you might have parent-child relationships with customers, or things like departments or classes or subsidiaries where you either might just want to see the child level or you might want to see the hierarchy that's making it up. Also pick maybe the transaction, the item. So again, the items can have hierarchies. So it's asking me if I want child level or hierarchy. And then I've got my quantity, and I'm going to use my formula field because it's the times -1. So then I've got my date, entity, transaction, item, and quantity in there. And that's just a basic table set up in the system. And within each tab up the top, you then have options for being able to sort based on the different columns. You can move them left and right. You can add filters to filter based on particular columns. You can also rename columns as well. So instead of entity, for example, you could rename that to be like customer, for example. Okay, so then that shows as customer at the top. And with the table, then you can export that to a CSV file. So with that table, I'm just going to right click on that and give it a name. So I might just put transaction data. Now with these ones, it's quite often if you add some more information or add filters, you may need to press the refresh button at the top just to see any updates you've made. So that's just the basic table. Next, I'm going to add a new tab, and this time I'll create a pivot. So with the pivot then, I'm using the same data set, and I'm going to start adding the fields. The fields that show here are just the ones that you've got in your data set. If you come to do this and create a pivot and you go, oh, I've missed a field from my data set, you can go back into your data set, add that field in, then come back into here, and it'll be showing in here for you to continue on. So I'm going to take entity and have that as a row. I'm just going to do child level at the moment. I'm going to have item. I'm going to add that one as a row. And then in my columns, I'm going to have date. And in my measures, I'm going to have my quantity, my net amount, and then I'm going to add another one shortly. But at the moment, if I press the refresh button now, that's going to load up that pivot. See how it looks. So just now I've got my customer name, which is my entity. I've got my items that this customer's bought. And then year on year, I've got then the quantity and the net amount. So in 2021, we've started to get data there for the quantity and the net amount. But instead of year, I can click on the 3 dots at the right and say, actually, instead of year, I want to do this by month. Okay. And you can see you then get a button at the top to remind you to refresh it so you can see it. But I don't want every month. So then I can click on this button again and filter. So I'm going to filter, I'm going to choose the advanced option. And here then you get various different options for your different date ranges that you want to pick from. So you can either do specific dates or you can do date ranges. So I'm going to pick month and I'm going to do the last. quarter. Do like the last rolling quarter, for example. So, or well, I'll do the last rolling half. So you can see then the date range that's going to pull through on. So that's going to do from January 2021 to, again, American date format in this environment just now, the 30th of June 2021. So if I apply that, and then I refresh my data, by using those kind of date filters, you can see it then shows at the top here, so within the last rolling half. It means that as you run the reports in future, it's going to always do like the last 6 months rather than or the last rolling half, rather than you having to change the date range every time you run it. I've accidentally pressed the back button. Let me just quickly add them back in. So I've got entity, item, quantity, and net amount. And you can see with these measures, they're doing a sum, so they're adding up the quantity and adding up the values, but there is also options for average, median, count distinct, etc. in there as well. Okay, so now we've got our customers again. We've got the items they've purchased. I can press this button at the top here, and that then does it in a compact mode. So that it kind of does the customer at the top, and then the items, it just gives you a bit more screen space. And you can also hide the different data sets and layouts as well. So if I scroll across to the right now, so April, May, I've got quantities and I've got net amounts per customer. Okay, so within my layout, I want another field here, so you can use this create calculated measure. And this allows you to do formulas. So what I'm going to do in this one is I'm going to take my net amount, so again, drag and drop, and I'm going to divide that, so just a divide symbol, by my quantity. Okay. And what that's going to do is it's going to sum up my net amount first and then divide it by the sum of my quantity to give me an average unit price. So again, you can get a lot more complex than this in the formulas. I'm going to apply that. So that then adds that on as a measure at the bottom there. And you can see it's called average unit price and it's got the calculated symbol beside it. So if I refresh that, scroll along, I can then see I've got quantities, net amount, and then an average unit price based on the amount divided by the quantity. On top of what I've done before, I can also, you can see as I've scrolled to the left, I've lost who that customer is and what the item is. So there is options here to freeze row headers and column headers. So as you scroll across, you're keeping the information on the left-hand side. So I can then at least still see there that for period 4, month 4 there, quantity of 10, and that's for their privacy filter screen. Some of these have links. So if I press on privacy filter screen, that's going to take me to the item record. If I click on the customer, it's going to take me to the customer record within NetSuite. The one thing that this doesn't have, which some of the other reporting has in NetSuite, is if you try to click on that value, it doesn't then give you like a drill down into that value. What you can also do is with the average unit price or any other fields, you have conditional formatting options as well. So you could add in conditional formatting to that to say that if it's greater than or equal to, say, 500, and I want to make that pinky color, or if it's greater than or equal to 100, make it like a yellow color. So this is, again, conditional formatting. So it's going to look at the first rule, and if it meets that rule, it's going to add that color. If it doesn't meet that rule, then it will look at the next rule. And if it meets that rule, then it will do that color. So you need to make sure that the rules are in the kind of right order for what you want to achieve. So I've got to put the highest value first, and then the next value. It's either that, or you could do between. So you could do between values as well. I'm not going to apply that to subtotals and grand totals, but then I can apply that, refresh my workbook. Yeah, scroll along, and then you can see the average unit price then has some conditional formatting. So anything over 500 is then flagged red, and anything under or over 100, but not over 500 is then flagged yellow. So it can become very kind of visual with color prompts on the various fields as well. In addition, you do have options for displaying subtotals and grand totals, and that you can do that on row or column level. And you can display whether it's at the top or at the bottom as well. So you might do it at the bottom of the rows. And that would then give you subtotals. So I can then see like the total net amount for Riverside Automation is then 20,517.22. So that is then a pivot. I'll rename this one and call that sales by customer and item. Before I go on to the next one, to make sure I don't lose anything again, I'm going to save that. So if I hit save, I need to give this a name. Workbook demo workbook. And then again, you can give it a lot more description in there as well. So that then puts the name at the top, and I've got that tab then available. Okay, so that's a pivot table. The next option then we've got, the third one is then a chart. So if you select chart, it looks very similar to the way the pivot works. You can add your fields from the left into the different layout. So I'm going to create a column chart. With my x-axis, I'm going to use a date, and I'm going to make that the month. And I'm just going to add a filter to that so that I don't get too many months. And I'm just going to select months 4 and 5 because that's where the majority of my data is just now. You can see at the top there, the filter applied is date, month ending 4 and 5. You could remove that filter by clicking the bin icon beside it. And then in my series, I'm going to select item. Again, I'm just going to do child level. And with that, I'm going to say, oh, I need to do the other one first. I'm going to do the net amount as my measure. So total amount. And with my item, I'm then going to do the top 10 items. And it's going to do the top 10 items based on the net amount. So it's showing the filter there, item by net amount, sum of the top 10. And if I refresh that now, so I've got a big one there, it's no item. If I actually click on that, I can take it off. And that's probably because of journals hitting the income account. So you can do things with the filtering. So I can go into that, filter my items and say if it's no value, none of, no value, so it doesn't include that no value. And that won't, it'll then make sure it doesn't include that in my results. So then I get a nice graph showing in period 4, my biggest seller was the frame privacy filter screen for monitors. And then it was the 22-inch one. Whereas in period 5, it's actually earmuffs that have gone up in sales. And my 42-piece toolkit and my monitor screens have gone down in sales. So I can then rename that chart and give it a name, and I can call that sale item. Okay, and as I go along, I'll save that again, just to make sure it's kept updated. So from that same data set that I created at the start, I can then create pivot tables, graphs, and other tables. I'm just going to create another graph quickly. So a chart. And this time I'm going to do it by month. Just check what we're doing for time. Okay. So date, and again, I'll do that by month. This time though, I might want to do it by country. So I have my series as my country, and then have my net amount again. This time I want to do it as a line chart. So there's your different chart options that you've got there. You've got bar charts, area charts, line charts, or the various stack charts there. So you've got quite a few different options, quite a few of these that aren't available on like save search charts. So if I pick line chart for this one and refresh that, okay, so again, if I remove no country, I think get United Kingdom, Ireland, United States, Germany. And this one's not the best. You can see create a line chart with the data in there. So what I'm now going to do is I'm actually going to now link to another work data set. So all these ones that I've been doing so far have been from the one data set. So if I press the plus arrow, I'm going to do another chart. But this time in my data set options there, I'm going to connect to a different one. So I'm going to do connect data set, and I'm going to pick my employee one. So employee data set. So this is where you can now see you can have multiple data sets in the same workbook. And on this one, I'm going to have it as a column chart. I'm going to have x-axis is date created. And I'm going to set that to month. I'm going to have my department as my series. So the department the employee works for. And my entity ID, which is my employee, I'm going to actually have as my measure. And you can see that here, instead of summing them because it's not a numerical field, it's going to count them. So it's going to count the number of employees in each department that have started and are created in different months. So then I can see in this one that in period 5, we had 5 new administration users, 2 new support users, 2 more products employees, and 5 employees that haven't had a department assigned to them yet. So we need to look into that to see what department those employees should be assigned to and assign them. So I could put new employee chart. So that's then just to show you that you can have different data sets in the one workbook. So you could essentially have like a CEO workbook where you have different reports or different graphs that CEO wants to see all in one place here, where they can just come in, look at the different tabs and see how the company is performing across various records or areas of your NetSuite system. So I'm going to save that now. That's my workbook. With these graphs, you can print them and export them, so you can export them to SVG file. So if you wanted to use these graphs on PowerPoint presentations or whatnot, then you can export them to get used there. You can also see a last updated date as well of when the data was last updated. And then with the workbook, when you're happy with it, you can then share it. So like the data set, you can then share it with either roles or employees. Okay. So you might say, I want to share it with the accountant role. And then share that. And then save that. And that then allows people with the accountant role to be able to use this workbook. So now that that's saved, if I click back on the Analytics tab, all the reports are accessed through this Analytics tab. If I go to Workbooks, you can then see a list of the workbooks there. And there's my workbook, demo workbook. And it's employee because it's an employee that's created that workbook. And if I created it, I do have the option to delete it. I can share it. I can also mark it as a favorite. And by marking it as a favorite, it simply means that when you go up to the top here, you can see my favorite workbooks and see them at the top. Okay, so they're now available to you to see. Also, you can search for workbooks using the search bar, and you can also see ones that are either shared with you or ones that are templates, NetSuite templates, to filter down to the particular ones. So if I do employee workbooks, then I can see particular workbooks I've got in this system. Okay, so I'm now going to go to my dashboard and see how those graphs can get used. So you don't have to go into an analytics workbook to view those graphs. You can have them on dashboard portlets. So here's one before, which was our new employees graph from a different workbook. And I can see the data there. You can also from here change the chart type. So if you want to see it as a bar chart or line chart, you can change that on the actual portlet itself. But to add these to your dashboard, simply go to personalize at the top right of your dashboard. You then get this analytics option, and as standard there, you can add up to 9 different analytics portlets to your dashboard, or 10 because I've already got one. And you can select it, and that adds it on. And like with any other portlets, you can drag these portlets around to move them to the side or underneath other portlets. And you go to the burger icon at the top right, hit setup, and then select which workbook you want to use. So mine was called Workbook Demo Workbook, and here's my different graphs and also my pivot. So you're not restricted just to graphs, you can put pivot data onto your dashboard as well. So I could put my top 10 items by top 10 sales by item. I can choose different heights for the portlet, and I can also add in a custom name if I don't want to use that top 10 sales by item. And then hitting save, that then adds that portlet to my dashboard. And that's then available to view. And say likewise, if you go to, you can open then the workbook from this particular portlet. If you want to go and see the other tabs, or if you want to change it to something else, you can go back to setup and say I wanted to put the pivot on. Again, a maximum number of rows is available as a setting. You can put the pivot on there as a portlet as well. Again, the recommendation with these portlets, like I said, that one's probably not the best idea for a portlet because it's so wide. You probably want to limit it to maybe up to 6 or 7 different columns being returned, so you don't have to scroll all the way over left and right if you're using it as a portlet like that. Okay, so that is the end of the demo. If I stop the share now. So Alan, is there anything on the questions?
Yeah, thanks, Kenneth. That was great. A couple of questions come through, I think. First one I can probably answer. So there's a question just saying, is this feature available now? And yes, the feature is available now. So all NetSuite customers will be able to activate it. You may see the tab already on your screen. And if not, then we'll share the recording from today, which has the instructions of how to enable the features as a system administrator. So just an example of another update that NetSuite have provided as part of the twice annual upgrades. We have a question as well here, saying, so one for Kenneth. So in the charts, can you amend the axes to reflect more useful information? For example, can you rename month 1 to be shown as January 2021? So can you choose your own terminology for the captions?
I think with that month one, we have had some issues with that one in the past if you're using the date field.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you're adding it as a period instead, that should show up in the columns as the full period name. It's because you're using the kind of month field that it's showing that way.
Okay.
Again, if there is any particular scenarios or that people want to investigate further, of particular reports that maybe you're trying to get out using saved searches at the moment, you think that this tool may be the best option for getting those reports out, you can certainly raise that with your account manager here, and we can assist with getting those reports set up and created.
Okay. And the last one is, can this feature be used to analyze data from other systems? So I guess the answer to that would be not directly. You would have to import the data into NetSuite, but if that came into a standard table or a custom table in NetSuite, then you'd be able to use the analytics feature to analyze that data, even if it had been sourced from another system. So that would be a case of making sure that the data is actually imported into NetSuite first of all. Oh, another question just come through about exporting to Excel. So can you export to Excel from analytics? So I think, Kenneth, there's certain parts of it you can export to Excel.
Yeah, it's generally via CSV export at the moment. Say some of the features that you might expect from saved searches and standard reports aren't there yet with the SuiteAnalytics tool. So it's got very limited export options. As I say, it's got export to CSV, and the graphs can be exported as a image file, the SVG file that you can use on there, so that you can export to CSV. When NetSuite pitched this a long time ago, it was kind of pitched as a kind of almost a replacement for saved searches. However, there is still additional functionality that you get in saved searches, which you don't yet get in SuiteAnalytics, such as being able to email out results and things like that from. Can't yet do that in SuiteAnalytics. So we do expect there to be, ongoing enhancements to the SuiteAnalytics reports as they go along.
Okay. Another question's come through. So do we have access to budget information to be able to create budget versus actual reports?
Last time I checked on this one, the budgets are available in SuiteAnalytics Connect, so you can do workbooks on the budgets, but not in the same tab as the actuals. So you can't do a budget versus actual at the moment, from what I've seen in SuiteAnalytics workbooks.
Thanks. Yes, as we said, it's a relatively new feature that's been developed all the time. They are releasing enhancements every release. The last kind of 18 months or so has had an improvement to the analytics workbook feature. For example, they brought out more templates relating to certain modules or transactions. So we do expect to see some enhancements, as Kenneth says, for extra export options and other features over time. So yeah, thanks everyone for attending today. Hopefully it's given you a good feel for how the feature could help to give you some extra reporting capabilities within NetSuite and hopefully reduce the reliance on Excel even more for the kind of analytical reporting that we can provide now with the analytics workbooks. If you've got any questions or want to go over any specific reporting requirements that you have, then just let your account manager know and we'd be happy to help. But thanks very much for attending and have a nice rest of your afternoon. Thank you very much.